कश्मीर के लिए मेरी दुआ है कि अल्लाह ताला तमाम कश्मीरियों को इक्वल डिग्निटी सबके लिए उनको आज़ादी, उनको हक़ ख़ुद इरादियत, ताकि वो अपनी ज़िंदगी के खुद मुख्तार बने। मेरी दुआ है, मेरी सपोर्ट है। अल्लाह ताला कश्मीर को आज़ादी दे, इज़्ज़त दे, तमाम कश्मीरियों को वो तमाम हुकूक दे जो बाकी दुनिया के आज़ाद शहरियों को हासिल हैं। थैंक यू।
The first conference now the moderator for the program would be our very dear friend, an activist and a journalist, Brother Shahab Karni, and he will take the program henceforth. Shahab Karni. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Middle East Institute. On behalf of the Institute, we welcome every one of you. This is going to be a very interactive session today, and of course, time sensitive. We are time sensitive. It will be capsule. I think we should be able to finish in 90 minutes. I hope so. But we need everybody's input after our distinguished panel guest they speak. So just to begin formally, I'm going to invite Mr. Farooq Siddiqui, the President of Kashmir Global Council. Please have your welcoming remarks, sir. Thank you. Yeah, please. Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to Kashmir Global Council, third conference in the United States. We earlier had two conferences in New York, and this is for the first time that we are coming to the capital of the democracy of the world. And I thank the organizers, Mr. Shahab Karni and Mujib Qazi, who have been our partners in this gathering here. And this Kashmir Global Council is an advocacy group of Kashmiris. It advocates for the restoration of the sovereignty of Kashmir, which was lost in 1947 after the subcontinent, India and Pakistan now. That time it was India only, and that two dominions came into existence who were colonized by the Britishers, and one of the states, which was Jammu and Kashmir, was at that time, in 1947, an independent country which had its allegiance with the paramountcy of the British, His Majesty at that time. Similarly, that we have now Australia and New Zealand and Commonwealth countries whose paramountcy is still the British Crown. But unfortunately, and the irony of the whole history is that the two dominions became independent, got decolonized, while Kashmir became an occupied country. Later on, it was also divided into three territories, and in 1962 we had a Chinese aggression there, and part of the Kashmir was taken by the China. I would also like to mention that there have been two United Nations Human Rights Council reports in 2019 and 2018, which very explicitly give a detailed description of how the human rights abuses are being done, especially in the Indian-held Kashmir. Not that they have left some of the clauses of those areas in the other part of Kashmir, which is in, which all of you know as Azad Kashmir. Kashmiris ever since then have been divided, not allowed to see each other within their own territory and within their own land. We have Mr. Raja Muzaffar here, I am sure there are so many outside this hall whose land, whose hamlets, whose villages have been divided. And that's the tragedy, that within your own land, if you want to visit a neighbor, you have to cross more than 4,000 kilometers in order to seek the visa, then go to the international border between India and Pakistan, and then come to your own neighbor. So a 2-kilometer distance is being made into a 10,000 kilometer journey. So that's that part of it. We have, I was only last month, I attended one of the forums in the birthplace of democracy, that's Athens Democracy Forum. And in that forum, what was important, that there were very eminent speakers who came and they emphasized that the challenges that the democracies have right now is that the people's participation is lacking. And exactly that's what has happened in Kashmir to an extent that there is zero participation of the people of Kashmir in order for democracy to flourish. And I would like to recall one of the prime ministers of India who came to Washington about a decade back, and he addressed the joint session of the Congress here, and I would quote that what he said, and that's very interesting for all of you to understand, and how the evolving democracy of India has not come to the expectation of what democracy all is about. And I will quote Mr. Manmohan Singh, that the democracy is not what is written in the Constitution, but democracy is how it will function on the ground. And I said, as I said, there are so many human rights abuses going on. The Indian democracy is not functioning. We have been many times by the United States. We have had earlier some meetings with the State Department of the United States, where in our discussions with them, they have always come up with this reason that India and Pakistan are saying that Kashmiris are being represented by the elected governments of the respective countries. But my question is that Kashmiris cannot be recommended by the people who control them and by the state that occupies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Farooq Siddiqui. Due to the time difference, almost 10 hours flight between us and India and Pakistan. So at this time, I'm going to bring a very distinguished friend of good causes. I call it an intellectual and a scholar General in Pakistan Army, former chief of MI and ISI, Lieutenant General Asad Durrani. Durrani sir, welcome to Washington virtually.
Thank you very much for asking me over. I think on the subject of Kashmir, during the last so many years, so many decades, so much has been talked about. If I have to make any useful contribution, I must talk about the part Pakistan played, especially where we went wrong, where we didn't handle the situation well. And that was most of the time. All the events that I'm going to, talk about or enumerate, individually can be rationalized or can find, one reason or the other. But the whole thing, when it's put together, it will bring very clearly to the fore that despite the fact that we used to say it's our jugular, it's our core issue, Kashmir is a jugular vein, unfinished agenda of the partition, the fact is that we did not evolve. We never actually framed a grand national strategy in which people were involved, and there was a steering mechanism to ensure that this objective that we have set for ourselves in the national purpose, the national aims, that we could follow, that we could adjust as what the requirement, but we still keep at it till the aim is achieved. I'm going to go through a couple of events and then try and give you also a reason that I think it happened like that. We can start with the ceasefire in 1948. In hindsight, it seems that it was probably the right thing to do, but I think from the military point of view, from the strategic point of view, it wasn't right. Once you build up a momentum, you keep at it, and not because of some amorphous promise or beside that you give it up till you can, ensure that your position is so strong that you will achieve the aim. So it may have been accepted in good faith, but strategically, it wasn't the right thing to do. The next one is about the case that we presented in the United Nations. I think Sarzaprullah was brilliant, very well presented. But there was no follow-up. After that, we didn't renew it. We didn't pursue it relentlessly to achieve our aims. In 1962, I think it was a clear case of Ayub Khan getting cold feet. There was an opportunity for us to do something about Kashmir, but he decided that he was going to be, more into another camp, probably under pressure, or again probably misled, led up the garden path by America that if he didn't do anything, something would happen. I don't have to even talk about 65 infiltrators because everyone knows that it was badly planned. A crude offensive, well, just so happens that one was part of it. 5 or 6 kilometers were left before he could capture the crucial point of Kashmir. And then again, someone here in Islamabad, in GSU, got cold feet and 5 or 6 kilometers just because the Indians had attacked across the international border. We stopped it, we withdrew our forces. So that was one very stupid thing to do. Post-71, yes, of course, the situation was bad. We had lost East Pakistan, we were in a bad position. But all those years, no effort was made to create certain excellence in Kashmir, which is, whenever the need arose, one could do something about it. Uprising in 1990, we got a little surprised. Not prepared for such a thing that I could have understood, but since we have not prepared those essence over the last couple of decades, the fact is that we carried out certain things not because of a certain well worked out plan, but almost haphazardly, all the institutions left on their own, no national direction. I must talk about here, right now, that the movement was started by JKLF. and there were enough number of reservations there in the corridors of power. Should we let JKLF take the lead because of their pro-independence one? No one at that time, except for a few people, thought that one could use it at that time tactically. The other things will come little later, but at least the resistance could be unified. About Kargil, let's set the matter. I don't think that one even thought through as to would it help the Kashmir cause or the Pakistani cause at all. Because only a few months before that, the two countries had gone nuclear. So at that time, everyone was worried about, the possible crossing of the threshold, not about Kashmir. I think the most pathetic response that we gave was after 370 was, revoked by the Indian government on the 5th of June, 5th of August 2019. Have we ever, could anyone ever think that we would simply respond by making another map and renaming a road? Not even humanitarian aid was, mobilized for reasons that one can go and discuss, endlessly. I think one should talk about the causes, why it happened every time, why those sustained strategy was made, why were we fixated with a particular aim and plebiscite or nothing, all or nothing, although the strategic thinkers will advise you that you do it incrementally, take whatever you can, and then piecemeal move towards gaining the ultimate objective. But whenever, this independence card or the third option was talked about, instead of thinking that how to now make use of it, because after all, a very large number of people in India and Kashmir were for independence, so getting them on board could have been, I think, avoidable. Very, very bad, very foolish statements have been made here at the highest level. People keep reminding me about the youth Khan having said once, for the sake of 7 million people, Kashmiris, we are not going to sacrifice 70 million Pakistanis. And this is something that has never made sense to me, except for some people who think that who must think about it, in a mathematical sense. There are causes where even a few people involved would actually turn the tide in your favor. And in any case, in our history, and not only in our history, also some other countries, they have pursued their objectives relentlessly, even if there are very few number of people involved. Pakistan first, of course, I think has always been a very foolish thing like America Fest. Don't even have to talk about that. But let me say that if the movement is still around, it's still alive, essentially it is because of the struggle that the Kashmiris have. So the credit goes to them. And the second, because of some very foolish handling by the Indians, rigging the elections, the muscular policy that they followed. And no one less than Vishwan Sinha, their former foreign minister, has made a statement and said, India has lost Kashmir. Territory we can try and retain, but the hearts and minds of the Kashmiris not. So if that, because of their foolish policies, because of the unwise thing, because of their so-called muscular thing, if they have not won the hearts and minds of the Kashmiris, if it's only their territory they're keeping, then I suppose there is still not only hope, but there is a good chance that because of their struggle and because of the Indian policies, this cause can be pursued further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John sir. So grateful and we are deeply honored, sir. God bless you. Thank you.
You're welcome to stay in the background if you choose to.
Sure. And now again, Mujib Saab, we have a long distance guest. I don't want her to put on hold. So since she belongs to your state, why don't you introduce her? A very dynamic leader, woman leader, Beverly Hills, we flew this morning from Texas, and she is the founding and president of Gendercide, a big movement for women's rights and deprived women. And she's a very big friend of causes dear to Kashmiris. So Beverly, please welcome. Come and join.
Thank you to the Kashmir Global Council for the honor of speaking today. I especially want to thank President Farouk Siddiqui Saab and the directors that I know, Raja Mustafa Saab, Mujib Qazi Saab, and Shahab Karni Saab. I also look forward to meeting many other directors that I haven't yet had the pleasure to talk with. Thank you to all of the listeners for caring so deeply about Kashmir and making the effort to come today. In Africa, there is an expression: when elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. I don't need to explain that metaphor. We know that the rights, dignity, and prosperity of the Kashmiri people have been trampled underfoot by two occupying powers. The oppression and abuse they have meted out have completely delegitimized their already illegitimate presence. It is time to send the elephants home. I stand here to express my solidarity with the people of Kashmir and to endorse their call for independence. It is time to free Kashmir from a binary choice forced on it in haste by a departing colonial overlord. Nearly 75 years have passed since Great Britain left. The question is no longer whether Kashmir should accede to Pakistan or to India, but rather, how can Kashmir release itself from all powers to become an independent country? This is personal for me. I advocate for women who lack the most basic human rights, freedoms, and ability to govern their own lives, particularly Dalit women, Indigenous women, the women of Afghanistan, and women of color in the United States. I ally myself with women who are overpowered and dominated, women who have no power except the power of their own voices. There are strong parallels between women's struggles and Kashmir's struggle. I support your cause, just as so many of you have supported mine. And for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. As human beings, we are at our best when we say to someone else, your problem is my problem. That is how we love each other. If we want to extend that love beyond our personal circle to people we do not know, we do that by upholding justice. We insist that people we do not know be treated fairly and with dignity. That is what you do, that is what I try to do, and that is how our separate struggles become interlinked. When we lock arms, when we support each other in pursuit of justice, we are more likely to succeed. Now is the time to lock arms regarding Kashmir. 2 years have passed, more, since we were jolted by the news that India had annexed Kashmir and sent hundreds of thousands of new troops into an already heavily militarized area. We watched in horror as civil rights were suspended and brutality was unleashed. We read of summary arrests, journalists who disappeared, civilians in lockdown, and armed forces maiming and killing with impunity thanks to a law called AFSPA. When the country receded from view under a news and internet blackout. When Kashmir emerged again, the shocking developments had hardened into the new normal. Never had the Kashmiris' call for independence been more justified, and never had hopes for self-rule seemed more out of reach. I want to remind my fellow Americans of our own war for independence. The noble and sonorous phrases we love to quote emanated from that struggle. We hold these rights to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Kashmiris aspire to those rights too. Or consider this very daring statement, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government. These principles are stitched into the American psyche. So how can we be deaf to the Kashmiris' plea for the same freedom and right to self-government? How can India, who fought the British 170 years later for the same reason that we did, not sympathize? And what about Pakistan? Pakistan was born of fear that rights and freedoms would not be protected in a new India. Consistency demands that we support the oppressed party in each of these struggles. Today, that party is Kashmir. All of you in the Kashmiri diaspora are trying your hardest to muster support for an independent Kashmir. You are struggling and sacrificing, and believe it or not, some of us are listening. Fighting injustice can be exhausting, though, even demoralizing. When I feel discouraged or tired, I look to Dr. Martin Luther King for inspiration and encouragement. If anyone had a right to feel defeated, discouraged, or just weary of it all, that man did. He never underestimated the size of his struggle. He said, "Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle, the tireless exertions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals." Yet even while viewing the situation in the harsh light of reality, Dr. King stood tall in his optimism. We must walk on in the days ahead with an audacious faith in the future, he said. We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. Here you are today with your tireless exertions and passionate concern. If Dr. King were here, he would find beautiful words to blow wind in your sails. You would leave this room with his wind beneath your wings. I am no Dr. King, but let me give you some encouragement. It is only because you all spoke out that I am here today. You spoke, I heard you, and you have inspired me. Because of you, I will continue calling upon my fellow Americans to make our foreign policy consistent with our democratic principles. We will continue urging our members of Congress to create a pathway toward Kashmiri independence. We also will press for freedom of speech and political expression, military accountability, an end to arbitrary arrests and detentions, and reintroduction of human rights observers and journalists. When elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. Let us send the elephants home. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We are deeply honored. Mujib, I think we have another guest virtually. He would like to speak for a couple of minutes. Can you please introduce from Texas?
Bear with me for technical difficulties. I'm not an expert on the subject, so let's see. Shaggy is there. I will bring you. Shaggy, bear with me for a few seconds. We were supposed to have joined by Terry Meza. She is the state representative for the state of Texas.
Hello.
She was facing some difficulties, the technical difficulties, that she was not able to join us. So we are joined by Brother Sayyid Fayaz. He is the founder and president of Democratic Caucus, Muslim Democratic Caucus in Texas, and he will be representing.
Can you guys hear me?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Shaji. I have given you an introduction. I have to mute you so you don't speak in the middle. Just kidding.
Oh,
Go ahead.
okay. Thank you very much for asking me to come. I have a brief message from Representative Terry Mesa. She is the representative in Texas State House, and the message, I guess, is for all, which is Martin Luther King Jr., his statement, and that reinforces your conviction also that we shall overcome, because arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Kashmiris are looking for justice just like any other community, any other nation, any other people in this world. They want to breathe same air as free people breathe. They want to live their life, and livelihood and pursuit of happiness, which is the moral foundation of our society. Kashmir is not one disputed territory, but it is a nation of people with long history, traditions, and culture. When I say that it's not just a disputed territory, that means that it's an injustice for Kashmiri people. And what I say is Kashmiri people are not on the table, where the region is all a disputed territory, and two nations, India and Pakistan, are deciding the fate of Kashmiri people, which is not acceptable. It is not just a territory or region, it's about people. People of Kashmir are fighting for their own place in the international community. And the phrase, "nothing about us without us," is valid here. Say, nothing about us without us. And that is the main theme that JKLF is fighting for, which I fully support. It is about Kashmiri people, and they must decide where they take their nation to. That's my brief statement, and I wish your council good luck, and the journey that is started should finish at destination.
Thank you, Sayyid Fayaz Hassan. We're so grateful to you. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to invite Dr. Humaira Gohar. She flew this afternoon from Chicago, and big activist on Kashmir causes. Dr. Humaira, please come. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Oh, sorry. Now I see what's going on. So I'm extremely humbled, first of all, that I was invited to speak here on this podium. That I see a lot of eminent people who have long experience in the area of political dispute and have seen much more than me. I happen to be just a man on the street, let's say, and the person who has experienced personally extraordinary loss that came along with that comes along with what people call as disputed territory. Every time people say a disputed territory, it literally kind of stabs me, because then I see someone's home being directed as a property that potentially belongs to someone that doesn't live in it, right? So you are taking problem of people out away from them and giving it to those who are still trying to understand what world has given them. So India, Pakistan, being themselves decided to be two nations based on their internal decisions, perhaps right or wrong. We have no clue. We have nothing to do with that. But being dragged for 75 odd years into in a political turmoil, it's extremely unfortunate for 10 million people to be dragged along for so long. And I think it is also extremely unfortunate for the people of the world who stand by democracy and free nation, for people who have created, for the history of humankind that created Osmanian empires and United States of America, stands today for 75 years and watches 10 million people being dragged, sometimes this way, that way, by two countries or two political nations that have not become nations yet. So while India, Pakistan tries to become two nations, we lose our sovereign nationality, which is something I cannot fathom. As a child, as a Kashmiri kid raised in the middle of turmoil, seeing things go from bad to worse, my personal experiences, after having spent all these years in West, studied in West, we all Kashmiris, like you see, our hearts still belong there. We haven't been able to move from east to west reason because every child who is born in Kashmir has a resemblance to my own children. It is very difficult for any of us to sit here and go by our own lives, not thinking about when will the political solution of Kashmir happen. And given that, in my mind, I don't see this to be something that is going to change something, it's going to in some way harm anything for the world population. It can only bring peace. I just cannot understand why this problem has stayed like that for so many years, and why is not the world able to see this as one of the most emergent and oldest problems that needs to be solved. Given the borders with China and Pakistan and Afghanistan and India, these people happen to be sitting in the most vulnerable situation now, and I think before it gets worse, and we have a whole generation of people that have completely lost their identity in some way. They really do not even know who they are, because they all the time keep being dragged around, right? Should we say, if we say Pakistan and then India, and why should they? The youngest generation understands that they are Kashmiris, and this is a new revival. In some way, it is amazing how Kashmiri kids, how their belonging to the nation has become much more stronger. I'm only warning this world, and I'm warning India and Pakistan. This is a new era. There's information across the world. People are not secluded anymore. You will have a new generation of Kashmiris who have a completely different outlook of their identity. They are not going to stoop. No forces can stop them. So before, you will have another whole generation of people doing something that is not necessarily the right thing to do. Or you will have to face some extremely smart people who will question your integrity of being the people on the podium. I really request people out there who have power today, because power is also not something that is going to be persistent with one nation. We have seen, this world has seen nations fall. Today it's here, tomorrow it'll be somewhere else. So the only thing humanity today can do is put its hand out and bring those who are down up, because you don't know whether you're down tomorrow and will be their hand. So for the sake of the sake of the persistence of humankind, we need to do this. I feel this has been too long, and I think I really think there has to be a political solution for this problem, and the land of Kashmir, the homeland of Kashmir, must go back to Kashmiris. It belongs to them, and they are absolutely capable of running their show. They do not need an external leadership. We have been independent forever. We have been a nation for a long time. I think it was somebody from Texas. I'm sorry, I didn't get the name. Who exactly said that Kashmiri people are nation people, and we really need to bring that character back to the people and give them their freedom. Thank you very much for.
Thank you, Dr. O'Mara. So nice, so very powerful words, in fact. Now, among us, we also have a poet and a scholar. Came all the way from New York, very famous, known name, Mr. Rafiq Atwari. Would you please come and share your wisdom with us? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It's good to be here, and it's a privilege to be here. Usually when women are not represented in equal number in any forum, I walk out, but somebody paid for my hotel bill, so I'm obligated to say a few words, and I've been asked to talk about the ground reality in Kashmir today. So I jotted some notes down this morning, and I'm going to share that with you. If you go to Kashmir today, this is what you will see. As your plane prepares to land at Srinagar, you'll be asked to pull down your window shades. You will wonder apprehensively about how unsafe that can be, as all the airlines you have ever flown and all the cities where you have ever landed, you have been asked to pull up your window shades for safety reasons. Srinagar Airport is a military base. It is managed by the Indian Air Force, which does not want you to see whatever lethal installations they have put along the runway. Conversely, Indian Air Force is afraid of you. You'll hire a cab. Your driver tells you his name is Muhammad Rizwan. He says it takes 10 years, or rather it took 10 years to complete to complete a flyover, to complete a 6 kilometer, 3-mile flyover. But during those 10 years, traffic patterns worsened, and now the cars on the flyover sit as if they are in a parking lot. Rizwan tells you he applied for a teaching job in a handful of many new neighborhood schools privately financed by prospering families who pay their teachers rupees 5,000, about $68 per month. He tells you he can earn 3 times as much in a single day driving a cab. He tells you proudly that in the Quran, Rizwan is the gatekeeper of heaven. Rizwan says that he also applied for government jobs, but his prospects are grim because since 2019, 8 out of 10 vacancies are filled by non-Kashmiris from outside Kashmir who are always trusted functionaries of the Hindutva regime in Delhi. He tells you, for the last 2 years, children haven't been to the handful of established schools that were ordered closed, first in 2019, when Delhi demoted Kashmir from a state to a union territory. And then during 2020, the schools remained closed because of the pandemic. Rizwan says that Hindutva is a pandemic. There is a dire drug problem in Srinagar, Rizwan says. The youth are injecting themselves with hard drugs. India is waging an opium war in Kashmir, he says, like the British did in China in the 1800s. You have to remember that Rizwan has 2 master's degrees, as I mentioned earlier. So he knows a little bit. Also, there is a critical domestic abuse situation in Kashmir, Rizwan says. Some of it is due to dowry issues, but mostly because of frustration created by massive military restrictions. He says doctors habitually prescribe long lists of pills which create side effects. The side effects create a pyramid which Rizwan says is medically termed tardive dyskinesia. The doctors prescribe another list of pills to treat the pyramid. The patient is a tree that gradually rots. There is no official acknowledgement of the dire domestic abuse situation. COVID is again on the rise in Kashmir, Rizwan says, adjusting his face mask. We Kashmiris can't help attending weddings and funerals. Let me tell you, he says, Srinagar received 165 ventilators from the Prime Minister's Care Fund. Srinagar didn't ask for them, and they didn't work. There are nearly 1 million Indian jackboots in Kashmir, Rizwan says, making Kashmir the world's most militarized place. And here's what he said. India has no desire or need to talk with anyone in Kashmir. It does not have to resolve anything, only manage. For management, it does not need to engage with the people, it only needs boots on the ground. Our big mosque, the Jama Masjid, has been chained and locked for 2 years now, Rizwan says. The Nazis banned Jews from praying at the synagogue on the Sabbath. The Hindu nationalists are banning Kashmiri Muslims from praying at their main mosque on Fridays. Since 2019, the Israeli model is being implemented in a swift way in Kashmir. If you want to look at the future of Kashmir, just see what Israel is doing in the occupied territories. Yet, the Palestinians have a global solidarity movement. As you reach your destination in Rajbagh, Rizwan bumps his fist with yours and says, "Why isn't the diaspora doing something to make our voices heard? Otherwise, we are doomed." You want to hug him. Khuda Hafiz, you say. Allah Hafiz, he says. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very interesting. Very different and interesting. Briefly, talking about Professor Dr. Katwari, I'm talking about woman power and woman presence. You know, we have a definitely strong woman presence here, and they're all distinguished ladies. One of them is just joined us, Aisha Khan. Thank you very much. She is the Central Committee member of State of Maryland Democratic Party. Would you like to add some comments, Aisha, or would you like to speak? Sure. Please come.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak on this stage. My name is Aisha Khan, and I am here to talk about how much Kashmir is important for the peace of the world and how humanitarian and nuclear crisis in our heads due to Kashmir issue. Respected audience, we all have a responsibility of keeping the peace of the world. But due to humanitarian crisis in Kashmir, peace is hard to achieve. In Kashmir, in the last few decades, 100,000 people have been killed, women have been raped, children have been blinded by the cruel and inhumane use of pellet guns. You might be sitting here rightly thinking that's got nothing to do with my future. That's got nothing to do with this country I am living in. I am at peace. Why should I care some crisis in another corner of the world? If you are not standing with Kashmir because of some reason, now is the time. Lockdowns are normal in every country, but imagine if you are in lockdown for past 30 years, how would you feel? That's what Kashmiris are feeling for past 30 years. I want to stand with Kashmir, with the people of Kashmir, because we live in a country that's built on the notion of self-respect, individual liberty, tolerance, and most importantly, the democracy. Then why is it? Because of over 8 million Kashmiris are in prison in their own homes. They cannot leave their homes to get medical attention. Can't go to get an education. When we stay silent, why is that? When the right of self-determination is stripped off. India government has to argue that Kashmir is a purely internal matter. But in the modern world, such a claim of sovereignty by the ruling elite cannot justify action that inflict endless suffering of their citizens. For India to pursue their international community of its rightful claim to govern Kashmir, it must demonstrate morally, constitutionally that Kashmir is embarrassed the governance. Yet, the current shutdown reflects the reverse. The international community must be consistent arresting of the international community bottom line that protects human rights, whether of religious minority in India or Pakistan. Ladies and gentlemen, Kashmir needs help. It's our responsibility to do our part. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha Khan. So briefly, we have very honored member of the board of directors for KGC Kashmir Global Council. I don't know whether if you guys want to add some comments. So we have Mr. Raja Muzaffar here. We have Mr. Altaf Qadri, Moin. Yes. I'm sorry.
Could you kindly add me for a few minutes at the end
About what?
for comment?
We will have a session later on. So just follow the instructions there and the time. I mean, I don't know whether you have this folder. It has this regulation how we are operating this session. Thank you for joining us. So I don't know, Raja, would you like to add some comment because we are under the time stress of the timeline as well? Or Mr. Altaf Qadri, please come here and you can speak for a couple of minutes. Yes, no.
Let others speak.
Okay, so in the session, we will have a good Q&A. We will have a good engagement session.
Yeah.
So we have a very honored, distinguished, leading leader from our communities. I will say that gentleman is a national icon of the name by now. Everybody knows him. I'm going to introduce him, but he's joining this session in his personal capacity, Mr. Khizar Khan. At this time, I would like to invite you, who was recently appointed by President Biden as the Commissioner of International Religious Forum as well. Mr. Khizar Khan, thank you, sir.
Assalamu alaikum. As my dear brother Kirby said, I'm joining you in my personal capacity, not as a.
We want to have a good view of this handsome man.
I'm joining you in my personal capacity, so not to burden my host with the reporting requirements of the Commission, recently appointed by President Biden to the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Coincidentally, before coming and joining, I was attending a Veterans Day ceremony today. And I'll share with you why I cite that ceremony. I was heartened to hear Professor Beverly Hill. My comments are a footnote to her comments about when she read a brief part of the Declaration of Independence. To me, that Declaration of Independence means equal dignity for all. It is with that in my heart that I stand before you. I stand in solidarity, President Siddiqui, with you, leaders among us, that we want equal dignity for Kashmiris. It has been long overdue. Yes. President Siddiqui, you mentioned in your comments about the State Department and its assessment of the situation in Kashmir and the role of India, that it is relevant that how atrocities in Kashmir upon Kashmiris are being evaluated in the United States. Let me share with you briefly, I know we're short of on time. The State Department in the United States recently published a scathing country report on India's and it states, significant human rights issues, including unlawful and arbitrary killings, including extrajudicial killings perpetrated by police, torture, and cases of cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment by some police and prison officials, arbitrary arrest and detention by government authorities, harsh and life-threatening prison conditions, political prisoners or detainees in certain states, including Kashmir, restrictions on freedom of expression and the press, including violence, threats of violence, or unjustified arrests, or persecutions against journalists, use of criminal libel laws to prosecute social media speech, censorship, and site blocking, overly restrictive rules on non-governmental organizations, restrictions on political participation, widespread corruption at all levels in the government, lack of investigation and accountability for violence against women, tolerance of violations of religious freedom, crimes involving violence and discrimination targeting members of minority groups, including women, based on religious affiliation or social status, and forced and compulsory child labor, as well as bonded labor. These are the atrocities that are being committed and Kashmiris are subject to. In that backdrop, we state that the world community must stand for equal dignity for Kashmiris. It's long overdue. In my personal capacity, I stand before you, I stand in solidarity with the honorable leaders, with your statement, with your organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Again, all of us are greatly honored with your presence and time.
So much, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Singit Sering. I come from Gilgit. We all, share the same situation right now. Parts of the Jammu and Kashmir state on this side of the line of control, parts on the other side. The biggest problem that Gilgit has today, which I would like to ask all of you to, if possible, comment on, is that the Chinese aggression in Gilgit-Baltistan is out of control. They have taken control of all of our lands. They are actively participating in local demographic changes. The entire telecom sector is in the hand of the Chinese right now. They are putting surveillance on local activists. Hundreds of activists have been declared terrorists for opposing Chinese occupation of the Gilgit-Baltistan. Let me give you one example. There's a law in Gilgit-Baltistan that if you come on the road on Karakoram Highway opposing Chinese projects, you would be declared terrorist. There's a written law there.
Your name, please?
My name is Singit Sering.
I'm sorry?
Can I finish this thing and then I can talk to you personally? So what are we going to do about that? I think I was listening to that lady from Chicago, I think Ms. Hamera, Dr. Hamera. She was talking about a new era that is evolving in Kashmir Valley, but unless we are truthful to ourselves, what we lack today is credibility, and the credibility of skipping about the human rights issues about one part.
Again, as I said, no statement, questions.
I just stand by the gentleman. He's only representative Gilgit, so he should continue.
Correct. No statement, no speeches, only questions.
So my question to all of you is, are we going to talk about Chinese aggression in Gilgit-Baltistan? Can we have another event like this where we could focus on what China is doing?
Very well taken, sir.
I think this is really
We're going to
important.
respond.
Thank you.
Mr. Siddiqui.
Very valid question. And if we have reiterated that Gilgit and Baltistan is part of Kashmir, irrespective of what agreements have been done, what Pakistan is speaking about, the Karachi Agreement or any other agreement. It is a dichotomy on the bit for both Pakistan as well as China. That China being a permanent representative and at the same time is floundering the United Nations resolution that is part of the Security Council. So, if I will recall also that even the Karakoram's data that was exceeded, which was ceded to China, has in its clause 4 or 5 that the sovereignty of Kashmiris will determine the end result of that agreement. So we are going to renegotiate on the basis of that clause that Gilgit and Baltistan is part of Kashmir and subject to the final settlement, that restoration of the sovereignty. But now, what is happening in Gilgit-Baltistan? We are because as I said earlier, that we are divided law, and it has to be from the Gilgit and Baltistan, the people have to come up and rise. We have created a Senate in which we have 25 seats for Gilgit and Baltistan. And Kashmir Global Council is going to work with the people of Gilgit and Baltistan to seek those Senate members from Gilgit and Baltistan so that Kashmiris can have a voice wherever they will want to go. So your concerns are right. We are working on it, but you have to help yourself.
Especially pertaining to your angle or the aspect that you asked. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other question, please?
Does anyone else has any question? Any question or comment?
Yes. Thank you so much, Shahab Saab, and all the KGC organization. We came all the way from New York. I heard all the speaker, he came from different places and background. Every one of them is talking about the Indian atrocities. They are talking about how the Indian, violating the human rights violation in the occupied Kashmir. Nobody is talking about the Azad Kashmir area. This gave a clear indication that the people living in Azad Kashmir side, they are living in a free life. And then I also, Beverly Hills, she also was talking about the Kashmir issue. I took one note from there. The difference between the occupied Kashmir and the Azad Kashmir, which is ruled by Pakistan somehow, there is no checkpost, there are no violations or atrocities being carried out within the Azad Kashmir area. And one more thing, it is not Pakistan which took this case to United Nations. This is the India which took to United Nations, and now United Nations have given two options. Either we go with Pakistan or we go with India. Now, once that is done, then the people of Kashmir, I think, they can, decide about the future. Or if Mr. Raja Muzaffar Saab or Siddiqui Saab can highlight how the third option will be adopted.
There is, we are talking about Azad Kashmir also. There is a United Nations Human Rights Council has given a report in which both Azad Kashmir, both Pakistan controlled, occupied Kashmir or controlled or Azad Kashmir, whatever you call it, is part of that. There are 4 aspects of the human rights abuses which are mostly of the civil liberty nature. But the predominant is in Indian part of it. The second question that you are saying is about that India and Pakistan Kashmiris should decide between India and Pakistan. That is not. That is valid for the British India, which you will go through
that Kashmir was never part of a British India. So the division on the communal basis is by the Britishers for the British India. And for your information, Kashmir was a paramountcy, and paramountcy always had direct contacts with the that time His Highness of Britain. So just let me explain. And so the division or the United Nations resolutions is not our problem. It's problem for India and Pakistan. If they want to continue, let them go ahead. Kashmiris have nothing to do with that.
You are saying that Azad Kashmiris have problem too, we have atrocities too, and la la la, why are we not included in it? I mean, I understood you want to be included in the conversation. I get that. And then on the other hand, you're also somehow, in some language of yours, very convinced that we have to decide between India and Pakistan. If there is an atrocity on the other side, then are you actually trying to say that Azad Kashmiris who are under atrocity actually want to merge with India? Is that what you said? I just heard that. I heard that Azad Kashmiris who actually are under atrocious by Pakistan actually want to join India. That is why we should bring the United Nations resolutions on the top, because that gives only two options. So that means Azad Kashmir that has been taken today by Pakistan should be given a possibility of joining India. Is that your suggestion?
No.
Well, then why is there a question of even atrocities?
Okay.
No, why is there even a question of atrocities?
Everybody.
It can be either one or two, right?
No, I said everybody is talking about the Indian atrocities.
We need to frame questions correctly.
Number one, we need to understand a fact. That is, Kashmir is for Kashmiris. It's not about Pakistan and India. Please take out this word out of it. Because once we talk about Pakistan and India, it's a dispute between the two countries. Right now, it should be treated as a freedom fight. But my question is, instead of arguing, why don't we try to have, prominent international delegation, people like Dr. Khizr Khan and some other prominent people. Let them go, create a pressure, because India will deny them. So can we do something about that instead of arguing about some minor issues?
My question is that, just for my knowledge, that is there any women organization especially working for Kashmir causes in Washington DC or any part of America?
Today there's not necessarily a need for people from outside like us who to work with. We have enough number of efforts that are being done on board in Kashmir by people of Kashmir to help themselves out. What one can do is, and all of those are globally available, you can get on internet and you can find a lot of Kashmiri young women creating different types of efforts, whether it is their living or whether it is development of skills and stuff like that. So yeah, there are, but there is no US American-based women's organization.
A lot of things, because my name is Farooq Mirza. I'm a president of Fourth Pillar Regional Media Watchdog, and I also a bureau chief of Public News Pakistan. One of the ladies, she talked about two elephants they are fighting, and she also talked about the glass. I will respond that one elephant is very bad, cruel, violating basic human rights, and the other elephant is fighting for the innocent Kashmiris and for their rights. Now I will ask you guys a very straight question. You are talking about independent Kashmir. Do they have a legal strategy that would become legitimate course of action under international law? Can you please respond? Sure. And at the same thing, I think the only legal base for the dispute is the original resolution that is already on the table with the United Nations. Okay. Let's talk about legal strategy.
What is the legal strategy? Can you please explain his question? No, yeah, I want to know the question. Please go ahead and answer it. What do you mean by legal strategy?
Legal, because I mentioned that there is a resolution in the United Nations.
That was done by India and
No, no,
Pakistan.
no,
Where
no,
were
no,
the Kashmiris
no.
sitting on that resolution?
No,
What
no,
were the
you
leaders?
are talking about the independent Kashmir, and what is the legal strategy? Nobody suggests. Nobody talk about this.
Let's get
How you
on.
do that?
Almost like asking the right to our land.
Okay, so Moin Saab would respond to the question that what is the legal strategy towards independent Kashmir?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I don't want to proclaim as if I'm a legal scholar, and I'm not also by any means a professional student of law. So I will not try to attempt to give you a legal strategy, right? That's number one. However, what I will say is that the norm of the world, since the World War I and World War II, has been a process of decolonization. And that is why, since 1947, when India and Pakistan became two independent countries, we have had almost 97 more independent countries, give or take. That is the norm of the world. In fact, if you look at the past 2 decades and look at the history of the world, in Europe, in Asia, and Africa, you will see that political issues have usually been settled by decolonizing a land or giving it independence, whether it's East Timor, whether it's Kosovo, whether it's Bosnia, or whether it's South Sudan. That is the norm of the world. Now, if you say that the only way to resolve the Kashmir issue is based on UN resolution, then you are basically holding that entire issue and the people hostage to that one resolution. In fact, that resolution has never been revisited since 1970s when India and Pakistan signed a bilateral agreement called the Shimla Agreement, in which they said that they will now resolve or attempt to resolve this issue bilaterally. And that is when UN Security Council, even though the resolution may still be valid, but it has basically closed its own chapter. Now, going back to the legality question, United Nations Charter, not the United Nations resolution, but United Nations Charter, which is binding on all 200 countries in this world, which is the basis of international law, allows and permits nations and people to have unconditional self-determination, which is, in other words, is known as independence. And that is how the rest of the world has achieved its decolonization and independence. And I'll add this one last thing, given that we are a few meters away from White House and the US Congress. It is the government here that was instrumental in bringing out the independence of Bosnia and Kosovo, two Muslim majority nations in Europe. It was US here in 1995 in Dayton, Ohio, that agreed on a declaration and worked with the world powers to liberate Bosnia and Kosovo from Serbia and Yugoslavia. That is the basis on which the international world and current international norms work and exist. So to go back and say that a resolution which only restricts the options of the people of Kashmir to either India or Pakistan is the basis of resolving the issue, it also goes against the foreign policy of one of the states that talks about self-determination, because that self-determination cannot be restricted to only one or two options.
Look, my friend, I will be very honest, blunt, and clear.
Sure.
If you want to talk about United Nations resolutions, they have already been violated by India and by Pakistan.
How by Pakistan?
Pakistan did not withdraw their troops, number one. Number two, no, let me speak. Let me finish.
No cross-talk, please.
Can you give me, I will give you an answer. I'll give you
No cross-talk, please. We're going to end this.
This is what Pakistan is basically misleading their own people and Kashmiris also, and which has been the core cause of what 1,200,000 people dead. Pakistan is talking about Simla agreement and asking Kashmiris to ask for right of self-determination. Pakistan is doing Lahore agreement and asking us to talk about United Nations resolutions. Pakistan is talking about Agra Declaration and asking Kashmiris to stick to this United Nations resolutions, which is completely nonsense nowadays. It carries no relevance in the international concept anymore. World changed, people change, laws change. Laws are made to break. One law is today, it's not going to be tomorrow. So it has lapsed, it has lost its relevance. So therefore, Don't hang this sword on Kashmir's necks. It is just killing us. We don't want to be slave of this narrative that goes nowhere. And let me give you another analogy. That is 13 states. I can give you an account of 13 states which were part of East Europe. They are today member states of the United Nations. They have no United Nations resolutions whatsoever. There were 3 countries, 3 areas which had United Nations resolutions. Only East Timor got it. Rest of them are just begging for it and dying for it. And they will never realize it. That's the practical reality. Please don't drag us into this nonsense. This is good for Pakistan. I don't want to say Pakistan just to give up your call for United Nations resolutions. Let them hammer it. Keep it. Don't tell us. Don't make us slave of this.
First of all, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. At the Middle East Institute, you came from different states. We know. But it's a different angle. Respectfully, gentlemen, that you have a valid point. In previous historical perspective, which we may not agree, or some of them not agree, we are going beyond almost 75 years of history. Here we are loud and very clear. For last 3 years, Saudi Arabia made a collaborative effort with Reliance Group, Ambani Group, to have an oil refinery kind of an initiative in Kashmir, $60 billion initiative. Last month, United Arab Emirates announced $25 billion in Kashmir. So we are talking about $85 billion altogether. Saudi Arabia is invisibly behind that. So when $85 billion, no legitimacy, no legal language, nothing, money talks. So my challenge to each one of you, if we are talking about peace through economic development and peace and prosperity for human developing factor in Kashmir, what is the issue? What is your problem? Why proxies have been so emotional and they have been hammering and stopping going forward out of box solution for this long standing? So people are suffering. We are staying on a 5-star hotel. Somebody is paying for our lunches and dinners for years. Kashmir delegation in the name of Kashmir. What is going on? Do you think Americans, intelligence or think tank, they're stupid? No. So we need to have a way out from this dilemma. We have to have creative. So this was the whole idea of with respect, meeting of the minds to go forward, way forward. Or are we going to be stuck in the history and the geography and my paymasters, end of the game. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kamisa. So this is the resolution that I'm going to read that was prepared by the Kashmir Global Council and consultation with the different mindset. Herein it's called Washington Resolution. Whereas Kashmir continues to be under occupation since the decolonization of Indian subcontinent. Whereas Kashmir was an independent sovereign country with British paramountcy and not part of the British India. Thus, the withdrawal of the British paramountcy, Kashmir emerged as an independent state, and the communal basis of division of British India was not applied ipso facto to the state of Kashmir. Whereas there are around 1 million military forces of India, about 180,000 of Pakistan, an estimated 40,000 PLA of China situated inside the territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Whereas grave human rights abuses have been reported by 2 consecutive UN reports of 2018 and 2019, which include raping of women, extrajudicial killing, draconian laws like Armed Forces Special Powers Act, arbitrary arrest under Public Safety Act with absence of recourse of law, curbs on civil liberty, and discriminatory law. Whereas the people of Kashmir have been forcibly restricted to move within their land and divided for over 7 decades based on a line demarcated by India and Pakistan that cuts through districts and the villages and the hamlets. Whereas the people of Kashmir have been deprived of universally accepted human, civil, political rights, they cannot freely dispose of their natural wealth and resources and deprived of their own means of substance. Whereas the sovereignty claims made by the government of India, Pakistan, China on the territory of Jammu and Kashmir as it existed on 15th August 1947 are not universally accepted and have no international legal basis. Be it resolved that sovereignty of Kashmir must be restored through peaceful means in line with the principles outlined in the UN Charter and international law. The people of Kashmir must be allowed to represent themselves as principal party to negotiate the withdrawal of the military forces of India, Pakistan, and China. The world powers, especially USA, must strengthen the representation of the people of Kashmir and assist in giving them a representative character on the global stage by helping Kashmir Global Council to evolve representation from grassroots level by way of forming an elected Senate, as the occupiers cannot represent the occupied. Withdrawal of troops from entire of Kashmir and immediately demilitarize, including removal of the mines, so that the divided lands can be reunited and the sovereignty over the land is restored to the people of Kashmir. The people of Kashmir are a nation that must be recognized as such that they can play a contributing role alongside other nations in peaceful coexisting. So I would request you all who are in favor of the resolution to raise your hand so we can have it passed. So I would say aye, who are in favor of the resolution, pass the resolution. Overwhelmingly, the majority of the participants have passed the resolution, thus the resolution is passed. Thank you.
मेरा नाम राजा मुजफ्फर है। मैं कश्मीर ग्लोबल काउंसिल के बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर का एक मेंबर हूँ। आज जो कॉन्फ्रेंस थी कश्मीर के ऊपर, मैं समझता हूँ कि ये अपने मकसद के एतबार से मकसद को हासिल करने में कामयाब रही है। सबसे अहम बात जो इस सारी कॉन्फ्रेंस के अंदर से उभर के सामने आई है वो जो एक अमेरिकन राय आमा से ताल्लुक़ रखने वाले जो शरका थे, उन्होंने इस बात को महसूस किया कि अब वक्त आ गया है कि हम कश्मीरियों को बराह रास्त सुने। इससे पहले चूँकि इंडिया और पाकिस्तान की हुकूमतों ने कश्मीर के ऊपर अपने अपने मौक़िफ़ को 73 साल से बयान किया, ना सिर्फ ख़ुद बल्कि अपने प्रॉक्सीज़ के ज़रिए से भी कश्मीर के ऊपर उनकी लॉबिंग चलती रही है। मैं समझता हूँ कि ये आज की कॉन्फ्रेंस एक नया संग मेल साबित होगी कि दुनिया जो है वो चाहेगी आज की कॉन्फ्रेंस के बाद इस तरह से कि वो चाहेगी कि कश्मीरियों को भी बराह रास्त सुना जाए, क्योंकि कश्मीरियों की ख्वाहिशात को अभी तक जो है वो दुनिया तक बराह रास्त नहीं पहुंची है। जो भी कोई बात हो रही है उसे एक तनाज़ा की शक्ल बना के हिंदुस्तान और पाकिस्तान के दरमियान तनाज़ा की शक्ल में पेश किया जा रहा है। कहीं भी पहली दफ़ा इसको एक आज़ादी के मसले के तौर पर पेश किया गया और हमें खुशी हुई कि इसमें अमरीकी जो यहाँ पे शरका थे, दानश्वर जो कश्मीर के हालात पर नज़र रखने वाले, उन्होंने भी इस बात को महसूस किया और एक्नॉलेज किया और उनकी तरफ से हमें बड़ी हौसला अफजाई। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया।
आज की कॉन्फ्रेंस एक मकसद के लिए मुनक़्क़द हुई थी, जिसमें ये मौजू ज़ाहिर बहस आया कि आखिरकार इतने सालों में ये मसला आगे क्यों नहीं बढ़ रहा है। तो सब लोग इस पे मुत्तफ़िक़ हुए कि मेन वजह इसकी ये है कि कश्मीरी को वहाँ पर कोई वॉइस नहीं दी गई। इसको कभी एक मुल्क ने रिप्रेजेंट किया, कभी दूसरे मुल्क ने रिप्रेजेंट किया। तो इस वजह से ये है कि ये आग सल्यूशन की तरफ बढ़ नहीं रहा है। ये ब्लेम गेम का हिस्सा बन गया बिटवीन इंडिया एंड पाकिस्तान, विच इज़ द बिगेस्ट स्टम्बलिंग ब्लॉक विच kills basically the human aspect of the issue. So we have been very successful to the great extent where the United States,
the administration is realizing the fact that this is the time that Kashmiris need to be heard with passion and compassion. That is what we were looking for, and we have, to the greater extent, we have got it. Thank you.
You are watching Capital TV Washington, the best South Asian TV channel in North America.